Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you always for stopping by. Let me start with Peter Brandt. He says, I'm old enough to remember the 1929 US bank closures. There will be a day when the banks, many crypto exchanges will be closed when traders want to withdraw tether. Being short tether anywhere close to $1 is a good trade. Yesterday we saw stops triggered in Bitcoin, which is currently at 6,450. It actually topped 7,000 at one point. This is Peter again. Some buy stops got royally ruined today, Bitcoin folks. It's called skid or slippage. This has been around for decades, he says. Indeed, he's right. Home thoughts, the highest education is that which does not merely give us information, but makes our life in harmony with all existence. Rabindranath, Tagore, an extraordinary man. I sort of said after reading that, we are willfully interfering with the cosmic fine-tuning phenomenon and saying, don't worry, be happy, it's all cool. We travelled to Lewa Downs last week specifically to work with the Grevy's zebra. This is a photograph from David Yarrow. Their stripes are narrower and less continuous than plain zebras, and in my view they win the Aesthetics Awards. Rajesh Mahan photograph, beautiful dawn in Nyeri, and then meet Scarface, the most famous wild lion alive today. I've kind of become a lion TV aficionado. I still rate the Joubert documentary of the lions in the Okavango Delta as the best that I've seen, called The Last Lions. Political reflections. I was quite dramatic over the weekend. I said war is coming. You can read what I said via the article on the Star. That link is there. Or alternatively, listen to a 12-minute YouTube footage, which is largely talking through what I'd written. In that, I said, if one is to criticize Barack Obama, one would criticize him for being incredibly supine in the teeth of China's salami slicing. Salami slicing was a phrase which I've seen before, but it was Bronak Gopaldas who reminded me of it. 15th of October, again, I said the method in Trump's madness is the triangulation of China and a serious ratcheting higher of pressure. And I was saying Z is looking a lot more brittle. US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Peter Navarro have operated with surgical precision. And you can see that surgical precision in the anti-dragon clause that has been inserted in the agreements with Mexico and with Canada. I said the incident with the USS Decatur, where a Chinese warship came within 45 yards of the USS Decatur in the South China Sea, is surely a precursor. I was saying B-52s are buzzing China practically daily. I then touched on crude oil. I said crude oil is battling a very precarious geopolitical situation with the biggest supplier of crude oil to the world markets, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, signaling loud and clear that its wannabe king is simply not tenable. He was already unconscionable, I know. Something I would never have expected to read, Goldman Sachs highlighting Saudi Arabia as a source of geopolitical risk and telling investors to go long oil because of the risk around Riyadh. Saudi Arabia broke a 45-year taboo with a veiled threat to use oil as a weapon. This is Javier Blas and Bloomberg. While few think that Saudi Arabia is prepared to follow through, even the suggestion of using oil as a weapon undermines Riyadh's long-standing effort to project itself as a force for economic stability. Jeffrey Curry, the head of commodities research at Goldman Sachs, said Middle East tensions are impacting the oil market have now broadened to include Saudi Arabia. The anxieties were exacerbated by an opinion piece penned by Turki Al-Dakil, who heads the state-owned Arabia News Network and is close to the royal court, in which he openly talked about using oil as a weapon. If Trump was angered by $80 oil, nobody should rule out the price jumping to $100 and $200 a barrel, or maybe double that figure, he said. And I said the King of Saudi Arabia serves at the pleasure of the President of the United States. That was agreed on February 1945, when Roosevelt met with King Abdulaziz of Saudi Arabia in person aboard the USS Quincy. The grand bargain between the US President and the Saudi King established that oil would always be denominated in dollars. And folks from Saddam Hussein to Chavez of Venezuela, and now the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs, Federica Maria Mogherini, have all sought to break that chokehold of the petrodollar. The Saudi currency, it's at its weakest in 2 years. Borzou tweets, first time I've ever heard, no, we just meant to torture him, and used as an excuse. This is Jake Tapper. This is a cartoon by I. Gaddo, Dinner at the House of Saud. And that took me again to Ryszard Kapuściński, the Shah of Shahs. The choice of that moment is the greatest riddle of history. It is authority that provokes revolution. This occurs when a feeling of impunity takes root among the elite. We are allowed anything, we can do anything. This is a delusion, but it rests on a certain rational foundation. For a while it does indeed look as if they can do whatever they want. Scandal after scandal and illegality after illegality go unpunished. The people remain silent. They are afraid and do not yet feel their own strength. At the same time, they keep a detailed account of the wrongs which at one particular moment are to be added up. The choice of that moment is the greatest riddle of history. Ryszard Kapuściński. I also wrote in the piece over the weekend, maybe, just maybe, President Erdogan has sharpened his skills and flipped the control the yield curve, decide the future trade on its head, and boomeranged it. And obviously, with the release of Pastor Brunson was one step, and he's been leveraging those extraordinary events we witnessed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Returning to my article, I wrote in 2013, when Barack Obama initially floated his pivot to Asia. I said this: I see the pivot to Asia as the encirclement of China, then the shrinking of its operating theatre, and then lighting the tinderbox, that is, the periphery. And Xinjiang might well morph into China's Afghanistan. China, of course, has been stuffing the residents of Xinjiang with pork, locking them up in internment camps and brainwashing them in order to prevent that outcome I was referring to in 2013. For a country that consumes more than 50 billion kilos of pork annually, flying pigs is a real inflation concern. David Inglis, currency markets, let's move on. 115.87 euro dollar. Working hard, trying to get above 116. My concern is that we could see sterling make good headway here. That might drag up the euro, but I'm fundamentally short the euro. Dollar index 95.13, Japanese yen 112.11. Swiss franc 0.9890, the pound 131.85. The Australian dollar was having a poor day. Let me just take a quick look. 0.7119. India rupee 73.935. Mark Faber's talking about a target of 100 eventually. South Korean won 1128.18. The real 375.36. Egyptian pound 17.9057, and the rand has firmed a little bit more, 14.3545. Dollar index, I'm putting up a 3-month chart. My target is still 100. Euro dollar, I'm targeting parity. We're currently at 115.88. Sterling, this is a weekly chart from Sun Chartist. This is clearly turning up, last at 131.86. Euro sterling, I think you sell the euro and buy sterling. This chart is from T Commodity. The rout in global tech stocks tops 10% from the start of September. That's from David Inglis as well. Let's move on to the commodity markets. Gold last at 1227.50. A lot of people are optimistic about gold after quite a sharp run-up at the back end of last week. This is a gold versus the dollar chart from Holger, and the point is that they tend to move inversely most of the time. Crude oil, $71.28. This is in New York. Copper prices look quite resilient and not budged as equity markets fall. And this is coffee. You remember I put up a chart when it was right at its lows, and now we've seen it turn and find a base. Emerging markets, the Turkish lira was set for an 8th day of gains after the country released US pastor Andrew Brunson on Friday. Maybe, just maybe, Erdogan has sharpened his skills, I tweeted, and flipped the control the yield curve, decide the future trade on its head, and boomeranged it. See the Intercept article, which refers to a plan headlined Control the Yield Curve, Decide the Future, a plan to construct the Big Short on Qatar. Sub-Saharan Africa, the family of a Tanzanian billionaire industrialist, Mohamed Dewji, who was abducted last week, offered $437,000 to anyone with new information that will lead to his rescue. The abduction of Dewji, listed by Forbes as Africa's youngest billionaire with a net worth of $1.5 billion, is the latest worrying turn for Tanzania. Once described as an island of peace in a turbulent region, the East African nation has seen a recent spate of politically motivated violence. Police have arrested 26 people in connection with Dewji's kidnapping. METL accounts for about 3.5% of Tanzania's GDP, according to its website. The East African and regional newspaper cited the city's police commander saying he was taken by armed white men. It's a very curious scenario. But we've had a string of curious scenarios develop in Tanzania of late. DRC identifies second wave of Ebola in the east, where initial outbreak has already killed 125 people. A minister said the latest wave is centered in Beni, a town in North Kivu near the border with Uganda, said Health Minister Dr. Ilunga. We don't yet know the scale of it. The epicenter, which was in Mangina, is now in Beni. The two towns lie about 20 kilometers apart. The second wave occurred as a result of community resistance to measures taken to tackle the disease. The epidemic in Beni is high risk and the situation is worrying. And I wrote about this severally, but in October 2014 I said, Ebola is about its escape velocity. The absolute number of cases is much higher because it exhibits non-linear, exponential characteristics. About 2 weeks ago, I wrote a piece about debt in Africa, and I said what we know is the dominoes are set to fall. And I said one domino that is suddenly tipped over is Zimbabwe. Chicken In says they're not chickening out of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe inflation accelerates at the fastest pace in 8 years since 2010. Inflation rate climbed to 5.4% from 4.8% in August. Prices increased 0.9% in the month, more than double the rate in August. South African all shares down 11.83% this year. Dollar versus rand, as I said, the rand has come back in below 14.40, which is an interesting development, 14.3545. Egyptian pound 17.9057. Nigeria's external reserves declined by $4.2 billion since July 5th due to increased dollar sales by the Central Bank of Nigeria. To forestall naira depreciation in the face of increased dollar demand from foreign portfolio investors exiting the nation's financial markets. Nigerian all shares down 15.24% year to date. Ghana's stock exchange up 11.15% this year. Let's move on to Kenya. Kenya sees $545 million for affordable housing fund in 2018. Helping the state to finance 500,000 new low-income units promised by President Kenyatta. The average cost for each unit will be 2.3 million shillings, which is $23,000. Kenya had only 26,187 mortgages by the end of 2017, worth an average of 10.9 million shillings. So this is an interesting development. There is no more room on the balance sheet. The question is how innovative the government will be if it's serious about getting this off the ground. Equity Bank of Kenya sees $22 million fintech income this year. Expects its financial technology unit to bring in as much as $22 million of revenue. The first year of independent operations, the bank has resolved to make FinServe an independent commercial subsidiary, one he said. Unit serves 1.96 million subscribers on its mobile banking platform, Equitel has said. Startup capital of $1 billion shillings and its assets are valued at 1.98 billion, Mwangi has said. Kenya's biggest mobile money platform, known as M-Pesa, belonged to the local unit of Vodacom, processed 1.48 trillion shillings of transactions in the first quarter, or 79% of the country's total. FinServe has been in negotiations with 6 Ethiopian banks on cross-border mobile payments and e-commerce. Ethiopians abroad sent about $4.6 billion back home last year. Equity Bank is down 3.144% on a total return basis. In 2018, it trades on a price-earnings ratio of 7.3. The market capitalization is $1.339 billion. It looks to be quite attractive at these levels. Nairobi all share is down 17.18%. I wrote on the 24th of September, bears roam the NSE and the number of zombies grows. Nothing has changed. The NSE 20 is down 25.03%. And a striking statistic to leave you with, 67% of all gun deaths in Kenya are at the hands of the